I want to share with you a little anecdote, a little story about a woman by the name of Margaret McCollum, a physician, a general practitioner from London, who in 1992 decided to take a cruise to Morocco. And in this cruise, she met her husband, a gentleman by the name of Oswald Lawrence, who was a British actor. Now, the majority of us will not know Lawrence's name, probably don't remember any of his movies, because he was not a very well-known actor. But he did have a life-changing role that he actually held for 40 years. His voice was heard by millions of people every day as they went through the London Tube to the subway. You see, Oswald Lawrence's voice was the voice that used to say, "Mind the gap." And if you've been to London, you know what I'm talking about. Mind the gap. So for 40 years, you didn't know it, but that was the voice that you were listening to. And eventually, he was given the zchut, the privilege of having his voice broadcast in every station, because he was, out of a general casting, the one that pronounced the words "mind the gap" with the best of the King's English. I would have never gotten that role ever. It's very humbling, right? Look, it was a daily reminder for millions of people of where they were. There's even T-shirts that you can buy in London in souvenir stands that say, "Mind the gap." That's how popular it was. And there's, to be fair, other actors that had become famous for one-liners. Remember Clint Eastwood? "Do you feel lucky, punk?" Or "Come on, make my day." So those are also one-liners. But I don't think anyone heard this one-liner as many times. Over the years, the London Tube started replacing Oswald's voice with a computer-generated pattern, because they decided the English pronunciation was even more perfect. And you know how the British are, right? It has to be perfectly pronounced. And so, in every station in London, except for one, the embarkment station, because they didn't have the technology that they needed to put the computerized version on, they replaced Oswald's voice. Now, this is not a problem for any of us. But for Mrs. McCollum, for Dr. McCollum, it was a real issue. Because when he died, when Oswald died, she would go and sit in a subway station, not to ride the tube, but just to listen to his voice. And when they removed the recording, she had to make a trek every day to the embarkment station. And eventually, it faded away there too, because they finally modernized. So she wrote a letter and got no reply. And then she wrote a letter to the Queen. And the Queen actually replied. And they actually kept in the embarkment station only to this day Oswald Lawrence's voice saying, "Mind the gap." And until her death, she would go there every day to listen to his voice. This is a very poignant story, because we live in an age of digital media where we all carry our cell phones in our pocket, and you take a picture, you take a video, and it stays with you forever. Mind you, when we used to have photographs, we used to look at them more often, perhaps, than we look at all of those thousands of pictures on our phones. And I still remember when my father and my mother, they would take out the reels of Super 8 movies and just play them on the wall for all of us to watch. But it was a whole endeavor to take out those old memories and listen to the voices. And even today, I bet you, we watch a lot of videos from YouTube and TikTok and whatever it is. But the videos that we record of other people, we don't watch that often. It's mostly the pictures. And there's a reason for that. It is so much easier to remember a face than it is to remember somebody's voice. It is so much easier to remember our parents' face, our spouse's face, than it is to remember their voices. You know, when I started looking into this story, I tried to close my eyes and remember my mother's voice. And it was very hard. I remember her face. I remember specific moments in time, like vignettes. But I can't remember her voice entirely. Except when she yelled at me. Because she was a very strict disciplinarian. But to me, there were no lullabies or anything like that. Right? It's just a strenuous voice. And I started thinking, what if we could remember all of their voices? What would they say? And furthermore, what exactly would we remember them saying to us? What exactly would we remember them saying to us? In what moment? Like frozen in time. You know, a couple of years ago, one of my colleagues, Rabbi Andy Green, who's now a rabbi in Phoenix, in Scottsdale, he used to be a rabbinic intern here. He actually delivered a sermon on the movie Coco, which many of you maybe remember. It's a Disney movie. And when he did that, I called him and I said, Andy, I heard you talked about Coco in your Yizkor sermon. He said, oh yes, it was amazing. And I said to him, oh, I would never write a sermon or even think about talking about a Disney movie on a Yizkor sermon. But since that time, many years have passed. And in trying to think about the voices, I found myself going back to the movie Coco. And it's a tremendous movie in so many different ways, because not only is it about voices and music, but the main song of the movie is called Remember, which is actually Yizkor. So I want to ask you, what does it mean to remember? And what do we exactly remember? Why are we here right now? The majority of us immerse ourselves in those prayers and close our eyes and try to think of those moments that I'm talking about. Try to think of their voices. And you know, the rabbis in the Talmud had a very sharp point about what Yizkor actually means. They say the righteous, even in their death, can be alive. Because the righteous, even after they die, their deeds speak for them. And these are their voices. We may not hear exactly the tone, but we're able to listen to their deeds and everything they did in life. So when we say Yizkor and we remember parents and children and spouses and friends, we're not simply honoring the past. We're not simply remembering. We're extending their presence into this world. Every time we gather here, every Yom Kippur, we come here not only to think of them, but to extend their presence, to continue what they did, to try to humbly follow in their steps. There's a beautiful midrash in the Midrash Rabbah that says that when God speaks to Moses, God says, I am the God of Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. And the rabbis ask, why doesn't he say, I was the God of Jacob and Abraham and Isaac? After all, this happened centuries ago. Why doesn't it say, I was? And the rabbis answer, because our patriarchs were so righteous that they continue to live every day. Every time we mention their names, every time we pray, every time we remember them, every time we engage in that, they come alive again. Now, I don't know if you watched the movie Coco, but it's a great movie. And not only is it a great movie, but it's based in Mexico, which makes it even better. You know, I grew up, actually, my school, when I went from kindergarten to high school, was right behind one of the biggest areas with cemeteries in Mexico City. So on the day of the death, first of all, classes were completely canceled. But for a week before, you couldn't get through to the school because the way was blocked. All the streets were blocked and taken by people selling flowers and food and things that they will use for the graves during the day of the death. So the movie Coco, I lived it. There are many little towns in Mexico where people still do all of this. And they really do believe that when they engage in these, I may say, very pagan rituals, they're going to be able to listen to the voice of their loved ones. Now, in the movie, this little boy, Miguel Rivera, sings the song, Remember Me. And by singing Remember Me, he brings back the memory of his grandmother. And everyone who sings this song is able to remember even their great-grandparents. And I think that in a way, when we say Yizkor, it is our Remember Me. There may be no music like the one in the movie, but the music of our hearts really propels it. And you know, what it means to remember, it means to carry their light forward. It means that if a parent taught you kindness, every time you're kind, you remember them. It means that if a spouse lived with joy, every time you're joyful, you remember them. It means that if a child brought you laughter and dreams, every time you laugh and you dream, you remember your son or your daughter. Yizkor, dear friends, is not the end of memory. It is the moment we pledge to leave their song and to listen to their music forever. So there was a day in my life that I will never forget. There were a couple, but there are two that I experienced with my parents. One of them, and I spoke about that a long time ago, was when my father taught me how to ride a bicycle. If you think about it, the majority of us remember when we learned to ride a bike. In the old days, everybody rode bikes. I don't know today. But it was something that was a whole enterprise. But I also remember the day my mother taught me how to play guitar. And I know that I don't seem to be the artistic type, but I actually know a little bit of guitar. Because no Mexican teenager should go without being able to play the guitar. You never know when you're going to be casted in a movie. Now, the truth is, in those days, somebody told me that if I knew how to play the guitar, I would attract girls. That never worked. And honestly, the other day I remember very well is when I lost my mother's guitar. Oh boy, did I get in trouble. Because her guitar was given to her by her father. And so, it's a complicated thing. Mexicans and guitars and music of remembrance. You know, The other day I was walking through Woodlawn Cemetery. I do this quite often, actually, much more often than I used to. And I was looking at the graves, and I know so many people. And I actually, at some of these graves, I stopped and I closed my eyes, and I tried to remember their voice. I could perfectly see their face, but I couldn't see their voices. And the one thing that I kept thinking is, I wish that everyone would take this walk at least once a month. Because it's not only humbling, but it makes you value your own life even more. To understand how fragile it is. And not only how fragile, but also how trivial some of the things that we do are. You know, it's not a secret, but in what I do for a living, I deal with a lot of drama. Sometimes I wish there was much less drama. And I see parents that haven't spoken to their children for decades. Siblings that haven't talked to one another for decades. For the stupidest things. It's all ego. And you know what? Once you walk through Woodlawn Cemetery, ego doesn't really work that much. We need to do whatever we can to say the words we have not spoken, to reach out as much as it hurts us, because they said something to us. We need to reach out, because you don't want to be singing "Remember Me," regretting not having done it in person. Some years ago, when Josh, our son, was in 10th grade, we sent him to Israel for a semester of high school. And it was an incredible trip to the airport, because Liz packed some stuff in his luggage he was not aware he was carrying. I'll tell you about that another time, not from the pulpit. And he was surprised, but he was also carrying his guitar. You see, from all of my children, each one of them inherited different traits from my parents. But Josh, his musical ability is 100% my mother. He takes a guitar and he can just play. So he decided also, probably because of what they said to me, that I may have mentioned to him that if he takes the guitar to Israel, maybe it will be like a chick magnet. So we got a gate pass that day, and we were waiting at the gate for the plane to leave for New York City. And there was a long line trying to get on the plane, and Josh was holding his guitar, and he was crying his eyes out. You know, it's funny. On the way back, we couldn't get him to come back. On the way there, he didn't want to leave. And he was crying and crying. And some people in the line were like, "Why are you crying?" You know, everybody needs to know your business in Las Vegas. And Josh says, I'm leaving on a trip, of course. We don't say where we're going, right? We're just going on a trip. I'm going on a trip for 6 months. I'm leaving my parents. So where are you going? And I go, oh no, here we go. He says, I'm going to Israel. So I hear from the back of the line, that's amazing. The girls are beautiful there. You remember that, Josh? I can never forget that. And so he went on to the plane with his guitar, and he sang on for 6 months in Jerusalem, and he came back to us and he kept on singing. But you see, he hasn't played the guitar that much lately. He mostly spends his days fixing up dogs and cats. And as much as I tell him, he has to pick it up again because it reminds me of my mother. He just has no time. There's too many dogs and cats neuter and spay. Too many allergies, too many ingestions of objects that they shouldn't be ingesting. So I want to do something that I hope is not invading on your privacy today. I want to call Josh up to the bima to see if he can play something for us. Now, like most brilliant ideas, we just thought of this yesterday morning. But I was working on my sermon and my words, and I just couldn't control myself. You know how it goes. So we're going to do this together, and hopefully my mother is listening to us somewhere. And she's watching over us, Josh, because every time you do this, I feel her presence with the two of us. Remember me, though I have to say goodbye. Remember me, don't let it make you cry. For even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night that we are apart. Recuérdame, hoy tengo que emigrar. Y cuando escuches la voz de mi guitarra llorar, piensa que yo estoy contigo y nunca te dejaré. Recuérdame. When DJ does it, it's much better.
Remember me, though I have to say goodbye. Remember me, don't let it make you cry. For even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me, though I have to travel far. Remember me, each time you hear a sad guitar. I know that I'm with you the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again.